Today we're going to go over the strongest armies in Rise of Kingdoms for open field PvP. Whether you're running 3 armies, 5 armies, or 7 armies, we're going to go over a bunch of different configurations in this video because it's been a couple of months since I shared with you guys my thoughts on the best armies, and since then we got Bai Chi coming into the game, and we have the updated crystal tech, which has a ton of implications for how battles are going to play out on the field. Things are going to take a little bit longer, so it's time for an update. But first, what's going on, guys? Cheers. Now, as you guys know, I am a partnered creator with Rise of Kingdoms, so if you want more Rise of Kingdoms content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, click the bell, and drop a thumbs up. Takes a quick second, helps out the channel a ton, and thank you. Okay, now the best place to start is the top 3 best armies in Rise of Kingdoms right now in June of 2025, and honestly this is pretty straightforward. You're gonna go with 1 infantry, 1 cavalry, and 1 archer. So first of all, we're gonna go with Bai Chi and Liu Che. I feel like this is not very controversial. This is pretty much the best infantry army in the game right now, and is definitely contender for the single best army in Rise of Kingdoms period. Right behind that is going to be Huo with King Arthur. Again, not that controversial. Insane amounts of damage coming out of both of these commanders. And finally we have Zhuge Liang with Hermann Prime, and that's it. If you're running 3 armies in Rise of Kingdoms, this is pretty much the best that you can do. Obviously your infantry commanders are going to be using the pincer formation if you can get it. You only have arch formation armaments, you can use arch as well. Pincer is definitely better, especially for open field. Otherwise you're using wedge for your cavalry and you're using wedge for your archers. Having that wedge overlap here between these 2 armies is also really good for free-to-play players because they can get their hands on just a single formation, and there's 2 different troop types for that formation that they can benefit from when they open up a choice chest or do a dispatch or something like that. Now, one thing you'll notice here is the lack of Philip. If you do have Philip and you do want to use him here, you can. You could either throw him behind your Zhuge Liang, or if you're new to the game, you don't have Huo, you can slap him behind your King Arthur. Just be aware, if you do that, you now have to run the Delta formation pretty much. But in a perfect world, assuming that you guys already have these 6 commanders, you don't have to worry about Philip for a 3 army lineup. You're not running enough commanders to get the maximum value out of the support from Philip, and also his active skill is really not that good, ironically, because for most commanders, like 95% of them, their active skill is typically their best skill or matters the most, at least on their kit. Philip is kind of the opposite. The rest of his kit is really good. His active skill is kind of, it's okay. And with 3 armies, you're only running 6 commanders, and if you're putting 1 commander in there with a subpar active skill, that means 16% of your active skills that you're firing on the open field is just, it's not great, right? Yes, you're supporting 2 of your ally armies because he can support up to 5 and you're only running 3, but again, in a perfect world, you don't need the fill up for a 3 army lineup. With that being said, if you're going to be running 4 armies, which isn't super common, but there may be some free-to-play players who are only running 4 because the 5th is used to grab a rune or to join a rally or garrison, or you only have 4 sets of gear, 4 sets of armament, whatever the case might be. I think the single best thing you can do for 4 armies is actually to run 2 infantry armies, the 2nd infantry army being your Ragnar with CPO. Again, very uncontroversial here. You'll notice out of all these commanders, there's only a single commander that is not AoE. Okay, that is the name of the game. It's been the name of the game for a very long time. The only exception to that is that recently, I would say in the last year or so, we've seen a lot of the instant proc meta with Alex and Philip. We'll talk about that later in this video, but right now the safest thing to do is literally this. And I want to be very clear, this video is not an investment order, okay? So if you're watching this and saying, Omni, it's a horrible idea to invest in CPO Prime in mid 2025, like, you might be right there, obviously, right? Like, we're going down the smite path for infantry, but the fact remains, if you're running 4 armies right now today in 2025, this is probably the best that you can do just objectively, and that's the point of this video. Like, assuming you have all commanders at your disposal, what could you run? Now, if you want to run 4 armies but you want 2 of them to be cavalry, you can also do that as well. Let's move these down here, and I think you would run the Arthur with the William or the Arthur with the Philip, and you would run the Huo with the Joan. This is sort of the best way that I would consider running 4 armies with 2 of them being cavalry. Again, if you go this route, you now need to use the Delta formation for 1 of your cavalry armies. I think the 2 infantry lineup is superior to this, but I know a lot of you may be cavalry players, so I did want to at least throw this in here as well. I think this lineup is fine as well. Just make sure if you're going to run this, you have the museum relic for William, of course. Squeeze as much out of him as you can because his active skill is not very good, but he is very supportive in the open field, and he gives you some more attack stats for your King Arthur so he can hit even harder. Now let's talk about the best 5 army lineup in Rise of Kingdoms, and again, I don't think this is actually that controversial at the time of recording this. Once again, you're still only going to run a single archer march, unfortunately, and honestly this isn't going to be surprising, but you're basically just going to combine the 2 different 4 army lineups together. You're going to use the second best infantry march, you're going to use the second best cavalry march, and it is what it is. You just slap those together, you're good to go. Truthfully, I really struggle to think of a better 5 army lineup than this one. The only thing that you might change is maybe you use your Philip here instead of the Hermann Prime. If you don't have Hermann Prime yet and you're worried about investing in him, that's totally fine as well. You could definitely do that. If you invested in a ranged march for whatever reason with only 5 armies, then I think the first thing to go would be your second cavalry march, so you would actually revert back to this. If you did that, it would look something like this. You would have Gajamata with Cordoba. I think Siege players are running Gajamata as primary still, but you can consult the Siege Rise of Kingdoms YouTubers if you have more questions about Siege. Truthfully, I do not recommend Siege in a 5 army lineup. We'll talk about Siege a little bit later in this video, however, but I wanted to at least mention it here because I do know that some members of the community did decide to go for Siege a little bit earlier on in their Rise of Kingdoms journey. Now if you're running 6 armies in the open fields, I feel like this is that weird in between where I feel like there's not that many 6 army players, but every time I skip 6 army lineups, then people comment it down below, so I'm just going to cover it here. If you're running 6 armies, then of course your 6th army could be that ranged march that we just talked about. If you don't have ranged, what else would you do? Well, I would just do a 2-2-2 lineup. I know that it's not very popular to say that these days because people feel like archers are unusable. I personally do not think that they are unusable, but I do think that they are the worst of the 3 troop types that we're talking about here. However, because you're going to be investing in equipment and you're going to be investing in armaments, and they're a lot harder to change, right? Like if you have a significant investment in equipment and in armaments, then it's really hard to break away from that once you've gone down that path. And so with that being said, I do think in the future archers will be brought up to the same level as the other troop types. It makes sense logically to assume that the devs aren't just going to leave archers in their current state, in my opinion. So with that being said, I think that even though, you know, archers aren't great in this exact moment in time compared to the other troop types, I think that if you average out their performance across all of Rise of Kingdoms, I think it's safe to assume that a 2-2-2 lineup is reasonable to invest in. Many of you may have already invested in that, and because of that, I think it is still safe to go that route in the long run, even if right now it is a little bit weaker than it has been in the past. That being said, this is where you're definitely going to be running your Philip with your Zhuge Liang, because Arthur has another good pairing and Zhuge Liang kind of doesn't besides Hermann Prime, so you kind of have to flex your Philip in here. From there, I would probably just rock the Ashurbanipal with the Hermann Prime. This is like the safest way to get march speed on the board here, and also to still have double AoE, get the benefit of the poison. If you do not have Ashurbanipal and you don't plan on getting him, because spoiler alert, I expect the next archer release to also be an open field commander release and a conquering release, so you know Ashurbanipal's day in the sun might be coming to an end. So if you're, you know, if that's not you, if you never went for him and you don't have him, that's fine. You could do something like this as well. You could do the Hermann Prime with YSG. This is definitely a little bit slower on enemy territory, but the damage output is insane, so keep that in mind. Definitely want to get the relic here, of course, for YSG. Very, very strong. If you don't have YSG, you swapped him during KVK2 at the end of KVK2, or you feel like this army is just simply too slow, you could slap Shajar in here in front of your Hermann Prime, or you could even do something like this if you don't have Philip as well. So those are just a couple of different options to fill out that second archer slot depending on what you have, and that's pretty much going to do it for your 6 army lineup. This is the one that I would kind of land on if you had all commanders available. Now let's go over the best 7 army lineups in Rise of Kingdoms, and this is where the variabilities really start to shine. As the saying goes, there's multiple ways to skin a cat, so depending on how you've invested in armaments, how you've invested in gear, and even in commanders, it's going to change what the best 7 army lineup is going to be for you. So to start this off, the easiest way to fill this out would be to just throw in a ranged march and boom, you're done. That's pretty much it, and you are good to go. If you do not have a ranged march and you don't feel like investing in one, that's where you're going to start to flex out to 3 of a single troop type and then 2 of the other 2 troop types. I don't think that we're in a world where you're running 3-3-1. That just doesn't make any sense in my opinion. So with that being said, let's start off with infantry here. Okay, if you're going to be running 3 infantry armies, what is the route that you're going to go? And I think that there are a couple of different choices for you. First of all, you're going to keep the Ragnar CPO the same, but you're going to split up your 2 smite commanders. And if you want to go all in on the instant proc meta, I think it is completely reasonable to do something like this, where you actually pair Philip with the Bai Chi because he's a little bit more tanky than the Alex. You do Liu Che Alex, who is tried and true. They've been great for such a long time now, it's kind of insane. That leaves a hole in your Archer March, so you fill that in with Hermann Prime, and then from here your Ashurbanipal is probably going to go with either YSG, or you would do the Shajar with Ashurbanipal. That would be another route that you could go. Either way, this is one way that you can run 3 infantry marches. Now there's one other thing that I want to point out here. If you are going to run 3 infantry marches, there's a good chance that maybe you don't have an investment in the Delta formation here, and if that's the case, then you would slap Nevsky in front of your King Arthur, and that's how you would do that, right? You would just run the wedge formation for literally everything except for these 2 armies because you're an infantry main, and that's how that would go. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about Nevsky's role in the meta right now because it's quite controversial, as a matter of fact, so we'll talk about that in the cavalry section. But just know that, you know, I'll leave him here to remind you that if you never invested in Delta for your Cav March, you could do that as well. In the event that you're running your Philip somewhere else, for example, you're running it behind your Zhuge Liang, or you're running it behind your King Arthur, then what you would do in that scenario, I'll just put him here just keep things even, is I would probably just slap William Wallace behind your Bai Chi and you're good to go. That's another route that you could go for 3 infantry marches. The benefit of William Wallace here is that he's giving you a 10% normal damage bonus and a 10% smite damage bonus for your super powerful AoE on Bai Chi. He also gives you a little bit of health, a little bit of march speed. So while I don't personally love William Wallace in today's meta, I think he is remarkably underwhelming, to be perfectly honest with you guys. Single target damages, I mean, just look at the rest of the list, right? It is what it is. At the end of the day, if you are going to run 3 infantry marches, you kind of have to flex in this commander. Now you could be saying, Omniarch, what about Chook? I think Chook is also fine here. The downside of Chook compared to William Wallace is that the stat distribution on William Wallace is better. He has health, he has better march speed, it is what it is. He also has a higher bonus to smite damage itself, not only with the 4th skill but also with the 3rd skill, and he takes 10% less normal damage, and he gives out mighty shields. So all in all, William Wallace is going to be a little bit more tanky than your Chook, even though Chook's active skill is a little bit stronger, especially with the expertise. So again, you could make the argument for Chook here, but I personally wouldn't. I just think that Bai Chi is already kind of a glass cannon, and so when you're thinking about the best pair for him, you probably want something a little bit more tanky than Chook, in my opinion. So I'll leave him here as sort of an honorable mention if you do have him on your account. Finally, with the new KVK changes, if you find that you don't really want to do any sort of instant proc at all because battles are lasting longer than they have in the last year, then of course you could just slap Chook behind your Liu Che and you are good to go. Again, Liu Che, I would argue, is slightly tankier than Bai Chi, and so if you're going to put Chook anywhere, it would be with Liu Che, but just keep in mind that like both these commander pairings at this point are kind of squishy, so you know, you could do this, but all in all, I would honestly prefer the Alex. Now, the last thing I want to touch on here for 3 infantry marches is that if you do not have 2 like pincer formation, or 1 pincer, 1 arch, 1 wedge, something like that, you know, obviously if you're running this, you're running, you know, the Liu Che with Alex, and you're running the Bai Chi with the William, then your pincer formation is going to go here, obviously, because they're both smite damage, and then your arch formation would go here if you only have arch instead of 2 pincers, and then you would do the wedge here, of course. Now, if you are a bit behind in your armament investment and you're running actually 2 skill damage for your infantry still, then what you would do obviously is slap your best pincer or arch or whatever on this commander pairing, and then from here you're going to get rid of these commanders because they're not relevant to you anymore. And from there, you're actually going to do something like this. And then from here, that's when we have to bring in the Guan Yu, right? You got to bring in the Guan Yu. You rock something like this and you're good to go. It would be your Ragnar with either Alex or Philip, depending on, again, is your Philip somewhere else? That could be totally possible as well. If so, you're going to use Alex. Otherwise, you can use Philip here. The downside of Philip with your Ragnar is that Ragnar already has so much defense that you would kind of prefer the attack on Alex. I know there's a lot of all damage here, so like it's kind kind of irrelevant, but also Alex is literally just faster, and so like if you're gonna pick one, you might as well do that. And again, that frees up your Philip to do something else. So again, if you're a little behind on your armament investments and you're running 2 skill damage infantry, you could do this as well. Now let's talk about the best 3 cavalry lineup, and once again, there's multiple ways to skin a cat here, so let's go over a couple of different ways that you can run these. And this is where we're going to talk a little bit more about Nevsky. Okay, we're going to give Nevsky the benefit of the doubt here. We're going to pull these armies down and boom, you are done. Now why am I talking about Nevsky in 2025 when I made a video back in January saying, hey, he's kind of dead, and then everyone ignored me, and then here we are 6 months later. I was right, you're welcome. Well, the reason that we're giving Nevsky the benefit of the doubt here once again is because the crystal tech has changed, right? And I do think that that has a broader implication on how long battles will be fought, right? That's kind of what I alluded to earlier when we were talking about the infantry marches. Instant proc may be a little bit less relevant than it was a year ago, right? Because I'm going to remind you guys, the eve of the crusade went from 40% all damage to 30% all damage, and we originally had 42.5% attack bonus from crystal tech. Now it is 12.5% bonus in favor of 15% defense, 15% health, and 10% all damage taken reduction on the 4 different end stage crystal tech investments, right? So all in all, damage went down, tankiness went up, right? And in that world, I feel like we will have to rely on instant proc less than we have in the past year, right? I mean, it is what it is. You may be able to stick to targets a little bit longer, and in a world where you stick to targets a little bit longer, the fact that Nevsky does not have instant proc damage, we could be a little bit more forgiving, right? We have a little bit more wiggle room, and we may be able to cast the active skill of our secondary more often than we had in the past, right? In the past, it was, you know, you never really knew if you were going to cast your secondary's active skill. Most of the time you would. Let me just be clear, right? Like most of the time you would, but there would be many instances where you cast one active skill and you're already retreating after that, right? So in a world where you're going to get more reliable casts of both active skills, then Nevsky actually is, again, we can give him the benefit of the doubt here. Nevsky shines when Joan can cast her active skill because she gets a 60% bonus to skill damage. If you aren't casting Joan's active skill here, then your Nevsky is going to suck. I'm just going to be honest. Like if you're only casting Nevsky's active skill most of the time, then this army is going to perform like trash. It's going to be abundantly obvious, so just keep that in mind. But I did want to at least mention it here because there's a chance that your Nevsky may perform a little bit better than he did 6 months ago, beginning of the year, right, with this new kvk tech. Now if you're in a kvk that doesn't have the new kvk tech, well then this is probably not the way you want to run this. And if that's the case and you're not going to run the Nevsky, right, then what I would do is probably something like this. You would just slap Belisarius Prime behind your Joan of Arc Prime and just leave the rest of the armies how they are. The benefit of doing this is that your Belisarius Prime is just going to make everything else on the board here deal a lot more damage, right? You're just going to be swarming them down. That's going to work really nice for you. Obviously I don't love this pairing, but at least you have the AoE on the primary here, which is nice. There's a decent amount of defense on Belisarius Prime as well, so all in all, solid. Don't love it, but it's solid. Also, this goes without saying, but let's assume that you're using your Philip somewhere else, like let's say your Philip is with your Zhu Yiliang or something like that, and your Herman's with somebody else, then I would probably run something like this, once again giving Nevsky the benefit of the doubt. If you are in a kvk where you have less all damage and more tankiness, I think you could make this work. Again, if you're constantly casting your secondary's active skill with Nevsky, then you're going to be getting a 60% bonus to skill damage to your King Arthur, which is kind of insane. And you do have a lot of stats on this pair, right? You have 20% attack and defense on Nevsky with 20% health in enemy territory, I believe, or outside of alliance territory, I should be more specific. And you've got a ton of attack, a little bit of health on King Arthur as well. So all in all, great stat distribution here. If you're looking at this and feeling really uncomfortable with your best cavalry commander being behind what might be your worst cavalry commander, then what you could do is something like this, and you could again go all in on Delta formation here, once again throwing that Philip in there if you need to. Finally, let's talk about the best 7 army lineups when it comes to archers, right? If you're running 3 archers, this is, I'm going to give you a warning right here, this is the worst of the routes that we've gone so far. I don't think that archers have 3 really good commander pairs in the open field. I think they're fine, but like compared to Cavs and infantry, I don't think that they stack up right now. That could absolutely change with the next archer release, so keep that in mind. Check when I posted this video. If the new archers are out already, then this list will probably change, so just know that. And just so you guys know where I'm at here, I'm thinking we're going to be getting new archers probably mid-July, right? And so right now I'm recording this at the beginning of June. I expect we'll hear about these archers within the next 2 to 3 weeks, hopefully, so stay tuned. If you don't want to miss that reveal, then you definitely want to be subscribed to the channel with the bell notification turned on. But until then, we have to work with what we have. So what are we going to do here? Well, first of all, Philip's got to come back to archers. All right, he's got to come back to archers. Sorry, King Arthur, you're gonna have to rock with William for a little bit. Okay, that means we're definitely splitting up the Zhuge with Herman, and in fact I would probably just put the Herman behind your Ashurbanipal, and from there, bada bing bada boom. If you have the Shajar, then you're gonna rock something like this. I think this is a pretty safe route to go. You've got decent march speed on at least some of these commanders, right? You have march speed on Shajar, you have march speed on Philip, and then decent march speed on Herman, plus you get march speed outside of territory with your Ashurbanipal. 0 march speed on 2 more, so that's why we're kind of spreading them out the way that we are, and I think that's a perfectly reasonable 7 army lineup if you're running 3 archers. Another route that you could go here, if you do not have the Shajar, if you decided not to invest in her for whatever reason as an archer main, then I think you would pull the Herman Prime down to run with your YSG, and from here you would probably pull your Philip to pair behind your Ashurbanipal. There's a little bit of synergy here where the expertise on Ashurbanipal actually gets you different varying bonuses, and the expertise on Philip has a small chance of casting extra active skills, and so there is some little bit of synergy there. And then to round this out, you would throw in Nebu here to get that march speed on your Zhuge. He does also have 15% all damage, a little bit of a debuff. He gives you some defense that you don't have here on Zhuge, and he is also a 5 target AoE, so all in all, solid stuff. Finally, if you are using your Philip over here with like your King Arthur, for example, so you're not going to be using him with your archers, but you are running 3 archers and you still want to run 3 archers, then you kind of need Shajar, right? And so you would be doing something like this, and that would be how you would run it if you don't have the Philip available for your archers. If you were to force me to pick a single best 7 army lineup, it would probably be something like this, where you run the 2-2-2 setup with your single ranged march at the back there. But also, I recently made a video where I talked about why investing in ranged at this exact moment in time might be a little bit, I'd be a little bit on the fence about it. So if you guys missed that video, definitely check it out. I know a lot of you guys probably did actually, so if you want to know why I feel that way, go ahead and check it out on the channel. And if you made it all the way to the end of this video, make sure you drop a thumbs up on it. It really helps out the channel a ton. It helps get this video out into the YouTube algorithm so other Rise of Kingdoms players might see it. And while you're down there, comment down below your thoughts on my 7 army lineups, my 5 army lineups, everything that we talked about in this video. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. While you're down there, consider subscribing to the channel and clicking the bell to be notified the next time I upload a Rise of Kingdoms video, especially if you don't want to miss when the next commanders are coming into the game. And with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. This has been Omniarch. I will talk to you guys again soon. Peace.